Hello, welcome to the Scale Bundling Cafe. Welcome to this week's update. Normally I try and do this on a Friday, but yesterday I was finishing off this thing, and to be honest, I was so relieved it was all finished. I decided not to do the new show yesterday. I just need a bit of decompression time. So what's going on the channel then is last Wednesday, I think it was, the sprue tour of this kit went up. As you can see, it looks really quite nice in the box, although the instructions are a little bit wanting, shall we say. Now, Peter Oxley's done a deep dive into the instructions. Gets really quite ranty at some points. I'm a little bit more measured in my feedback of the instructions. If you've got a little bit of modelling nous and you've had a little bit of a heads up that it's not really a problem, you just need to be aware of some of the errors and omissions. So if you can sort of wade through Peter's ranting and get to the good stuff, I can highly recommend pointing you in that direction if you're about to start this kit, or you could just wait for the build series of this, which is coming up very soon. This week, tomorrow, in fact, as I film this, Sunday is part one, which is the introduction of this project. And I need to get my editing hat on and get editing the rest of it. I'm going to break it down into probably the cockpit, and then the main one is going to be the construction, and then just a little bit of finishing of painting. And there's not too much weathering on this one. They were fairly clean. I've had one or two comments already on Facebook commenting on how clean this model is. Well, they were in real life, and I'm not about to start doing silly over the top weathering, fading, all that kind of stuff when the real thing was kept really quite clean and well looked after. So I've tried to just minimize the weathering, some washes here, a little bit of staining here and there, in order to try and replicate the real thing, which is what I always try and do. That's that. Right, so the project is finished then, clearly. Little bit of a debrief now. I'm going to try not to get ranty because it's not a great kit. There are issues with it, some major issues here and there, but just a lot of frustrations along the way. This kit was not the first one. The FA2 was the first one. Then this came out, and then the GR3, and the GR3 and the T8 have had the molds tweaked, so they do fit better than this. Drew said, friend of the channel, Drew said that he didn't find too much wrong with the FA2. Obviously I can't comment on that, but there are some issues with this one. So the build of this all started in the cockpit. It was complicated because I used the Ares cockpit. It's clearly an earlier Ares. It just, no way is it going to fit. It's at least minimum 1 millimeter too wide on both sides. Why they just can't take the original kit part and just use the dimensions from that for their pattern? I mean, come on, help the modeler out. So that needed a hell of a lot of modification to get that to fit. And even now, even though I thinned it right down as far as I could and I got it to fit, I do think it pushes the sills out just a little bit. So the canopy isn't a great fit on this one, but the canopy's open. So my recommendation is, if you're going to do it with the canopy open, then yeah, go for it. But be prepared for a lot of carving and sanding. If you're going to do it with the canopy closed, then actually I think it quite suits this aeroplane, the canopy closed. Just stick with the kit cockpit. You'll be absolutely fine. I used the who are they now? I can't remember the name of the Kits World. That was it. Kits World 3D printed decals for all the instruments and everything. And I was wary about using them. I've used them once before on the Chipmunk, and there was a little sort of white, almost like a misregister, a little sort of white border on one side. This in the packet looked better, but that white border was still there, which was a real shame. therefore I had to sort of trim that away in parts and touch it up with a little bit of paint. You know, not insurmountable, but a bit of a pain in the backside nonetheless. The seat belts, the Airres seat belts are photo etch. The seat is absolutely beautiful, Mark 10. I've got many hours sat on one of those, and what I really liked was that what we do in the UK is clip the shoulder harness into 2 clips on the headbox up here to keep them out of the way, rather than leave them dangling and floating around in the cockpit. So a Mark 10, you should have the clips up here, and the little box for that was actually moulded hollow. It's incredibly fine. The photo etch is too wide for it, so I just snipped those down and glued them in. So it's authentically up here, which I really like that feature. So yeah, really nice seat going in. No decals for it, so I raided my Airscale stash and added some placards to it, and really pleased with how the seat turned out. The way that the kit breakdown is to glue the front nose wheel well, which has some horrid seams and locating pins and blah blah blah, which is all visible. I did my best to try and disguise it. That should glue to the cockpit, and then that assembly, the fan, intake fan, glues onto that, and then the whole assembly goes into the front of the cockpit. Obviously I'm using a resin cockpit, so what I did is I modified the wheel well, added a little bit of detailing in there. That was glued in separately to the cockpit, which I mounted on some L-shaped brackets from plastic card, Plastruct, and a replacement resin fan, which was beautiful. And then all that was, the sort of intake was painted white, and then when I came to put the fuselage together, there was big gaps around the outside. Now there is a cutout on the fuselage part, and there's a tab for the intake part to go into, but there's a big gap of 1 millimeter about all the way around. So I ended up backing it up with some 5-minute epoxy, and I ended up actually filling that. As it turns out, there's actually a ridge on the intakes which is supposed to go into that gap. So, but why they've done the sort of cutout on the tab, I don't know, because that's a bit misleading. So when it came to the intakes, I had to cut the mounting lug off. You have an option of the doors. Do you want the doors engine running, so flush, or do you want the doors engine shut down, which is what they normally are on the ground, obviously, without a pilot or an engineer doing a ground run. Mustn't forget our engineer friends. The droopy doors at the top. So I put those in. Unfortunately, I put them in the wrong way round. Again, which was a massive pain in the bum, because the intakes don't fit at all. Big gaps, big steps. So out with the epoxy filler and sanded the whole lot down, did a big rescribing job, and then put up some progress pictures, and it was pointed out that the hinge, sort of flappy hinge bit, I'd done it from the rear, and actually this should be hinged from the front. I thought about just ignoring it, but I'm building this for a friend of mine whose attention to detail is legendary. So I bit the bullet. I snapped off the intakes. Luckily I just used super glue and a bit of extra thin type glue to glue those on. If I'd done 5-minute epoxy, they would not have been coming off. Managed to cut out the relevant droopy doors and fixed it all up. And while I was in there, I'd noticed I'd painted the intakes white, which is incorrect. All of the intakes, apart from the lip, bottom part of the lip, should be extra dark sea grey, not white. So if you ever see a Sea Harrier model, or you're going to build a Sea Harrier model, do the intakes extra dark sea grey. Do not do them white, because they weren't. So I ended up putting respraying those, which was quite handy when it was all disassembled, putting it all back together again, and then doing another full fill, rescribe, blah job on that. The intakes don't really fit very well top and bottom, so I had used quite a bit of perfect plastic putty in there, which obviously is going to be trashed when you rip them off. So I had to redo that. I then had to mask off the intake and then respray the extra dot sea grey over that bit, those bits. So that was all a complete pain in the hoop. Anyway, once I'd done that, it was time for the wings. The wings don't fit very well to each other, and then they don't fit very well to the fuselage. There's sort of random bits of curvy plastic near the wingtips you've got to carve off. Eventually I got the wings together and then came up with a strategy of minimizing the gappage. So there's considerable gap underneath at the wing root. So I added a spreader bar in the fuselage. I had put all the nozzle mounting mechanism, had put all that in, because my theory was I could just slip the resin replacements from Ares over the top. No, that wasn't going to work, so I took the opportunity to rip all that out. Then I added some shims in the lower wing parts to make sure that the fuselage bit would push them up to minimize that. So that helped with the contours, and it also helped minimize the gap under the wing. But you're still left with a step underneath. So I glued in a plastic shim, a very thin plastic card, is all it took. And that went a long way to sorting out the underside. On the upper side, you've got a gap at the rear end, but I didn't think mine was that bad. Some people have minimized the gap at the front to maximize the gap at the rear to minimize the cleanup at the front. I did the reverse. I minimized the gap at the rear in order to get the contours lined up best. So I didn't have to shim that, but that was just slathered in epoxy filler. I had to carve down some of the plastic at the front on the shoulders, and still had a pretty hideous gap at the front, which I could have shimmed, but actually I just used the epoxy putty. When that was all dry, big sand down job, big rescribe job of everywhere, and actually it looked quite neat in the end, but it was a massive amount of work. The tailplanes don't fit particularly very well, and they're very thin, so it's a very small mating surface. They were drilled and pinned for extra strength, and then glued in as well, and then a bit of filler. And what else can I say? I used the Ares resin wheel bay, which doesn't really fit, so don't bother with that. And it just caused nightmares. The stock undercarriage bay I use, but then the doors are normally closed on a slight droop, so I glued the doors in place. The mounting for the main gear was I drilled a hole, and then I put some Albion Alloys tubing in there, and then what I did is I drilled out the main gear leg. I snipped it down, I drilled it out, I added a tube of smaller diameter that would slide in the big one, so actually the main bogies actually float, actually moves up and down. They're not glued in, so the weight is carried on the nose wheel, the two outriggers, and like I say, the main gear, then you can just pull down so that's in contact with the ground. So if you lift the model up, you'll leave the main wheel bogie thing left behind. I used the ResKit wheels, which are really lovely, detailed. The rim seems to stick out a little bit but what I remember of the Harrier, there's a bit of a feature that the rim sticks out a bit because the tyres are quite of low pressure. They are weighted, so I haven't actually glued the ResKit wheels on, so my friend can actually tweak the wheels if he needs to. It's all set up for him, but you know, he might want to do a little bit of tweaking on that, so he can do if he wishes. The nose gear is a nightmare. It comes in two halves. It doesn't fit particularly well. You have to sandwich the nose gear, the nose wheel in there, so it kind of floats around a little bit. I did my best. So some of the pictures you'll see the nose wheel looks a little bit wonky. I've kind of fixed that a little bit as much as I can, but it's just a nightmare with everything on this bloody kit. So I did that. The outriggers are quite positive, but the angle, maybe because I had to do all the modifications on the wing to try and minimize the gaps, they're on a bit of a wonk, so I had to kind of very carefully trying to bend those straight. That was a nightmare. The photo etch wing fences kept on falling off despite a load of super glue and stuff. Luckily, I kept on finding them and gluing them back in. That was a nightmare. The windscreen, the sort of shroud with the instrument panel, that fit really well actually once you carve out the old shroud. So that's nicely detailed with photo etch gun sight. The windscreen didn't fit particularly well, so that needed a load of filling. The intake doesn't, the nose cone didn't fit particularly well, so I actually cut the shim off, sanded it all flat, stuck that on, so that improved that. The pitot is master barrels. The mounting for it doesn't fit very well, so that needed modification. What else? The ordnance, I've used magnets for the first time. That worked quite well. Really pleased with how that turned out. I did back it up with a little bit of just a little bit of ultra glue. That's the ammo, like clear resin type glue stuff, just to help hold that in place. So that actually worked quite well. I was quite pleased with that. You only get 9 lemurs in the kit, whereas the early pre-Falkland Shah had 9 Golfs. So I used the Res Kit 9 lemur, which I had, and scratch built the 9 Golf fins. They were drilled and pinned into the pylons. What else? Right, the painting is just MRP. It was a bit of a nightmare trying to get the fuselage demarcation correct and symmetrical, because it's quite a compound, like double curves, concave, convex. Just where the lower intakes flare out, so that was a complete nightmare trying to get that perfectly symmetrical. Yeah, that was difficult. Trying to mask off the nose cone, because the mounting thing needs filler and stuff. That makes that really awkward. Maybe that could be left off and painted separately. I don't know. I did put some lead shot in the nose cone just in case, but it doesn't need it, I don't think. What else? Painting wise, yeah, fairly straightforward. I did a bit of shading on the top, but not too much, because these were new aeroplanes, and then the undersides were repainted on the way down south a few years later, and then they all got resprayed when they got back. So yeah, not too much fading work on the top, just a little bit, just to make it a little bit interesting. Oil wash, quite subtle underneath, because these airplanes were not that well weathered at all. So just a bit of a wash, bit of streaking from the over thick vortex generators. Decals by Cartograph, they were really, really nice, but the rudder, which didn't fit at all, that needs shimming and sticking in, and the markings go across the rudder. So they kind of split and stuff across that, so that needed a bit of, and there's like little actuator things at the bottom, which the decal didn't like at all, so the decal split down there, so that all needed touching up with a bit of paint. Then it was a mix of VMS varnish, so satin with some gloss in there, because I wanted to retain the shine. What else? Yeah, the instructions for the decals are misleading in some places. I just followed them implicitly because I don't really know the Harrier that well. Then some people pointed out that I'd made a few mistakes, but I just followed the instructions, so that needed sorting out. So what it is, I just sanded the varnish layer off, bit of sellotape to lift the decals, blended in the varnish, a little bit of touch up here and there, and then varnish over the top. That was a pain. Then putting it all together. As I said, I mentioned the undercarriage. The nose wheel kind of floats. It's not very positive at all. So I used 5-minute epoxy glue, like Araldite stuff there. But it stays very wobbly for a long time. So I actually had to hold it and make sure that was all straight, which I kind of managed. The wonkiness is the nose wheel, which doesn't really fit that well. Better than the kit, using the res kit, definitely, but it's still, you know, awkward. Aerials didn't line up on the spine particularly very well. The canopy is separate from the frame. which is a bit of an advantage in one point because Area supply a resin frame which is much more detailed, which is lovely, but separate canopies and frames never work. So that was a monster pain in the ass. And then right at the end, rather than engraving the MDC cord, which is what all manufacturers should do, because then you could just touch in a bit of white oil paint, it flows in, very easily clean up any excess. No, that's raised. So I tried, there's no way I was going to be able to pick it out with the brush and make it look neat. That was a non-starter. So I tried dry brushing it with a bit of dry brush paint from Arrow, but it didn't really stick to it because it's very shiny. So that didn't really work. My friend pointed out that you couldn't really see the MDC cord, which was true on the photos, but actually the light picks it up really well, and it actually looks okay. But I've actually just put the decal on now. So if he doesn't like it, he can just, with a little bit of sellotape, just remove that decal. I haven't used any solvent over the top, just set it underneath just to help it stick down. And yeah, clear bits on, aerials on, finished, thank God. It's been a complete slog. At some points during the build I was thinking I'd really like a Falklands one all over extra dark sea grey in my collection, but I'm not going through this again. I'm not going to build another one. You can't really, I like really neat finishes at the end, which is normally why I only build really good kits. I've done my absolute best with this. I know my friend can be picky, sounds a bit rude. You know, he's paying me to do it, and he's paying it for the Whiskers charity. More of that in a second. But do you know what? I'm just deeply frustrated with it. I can't get as neat a finish as I would like. I hope he's going to be happy with it. It's the best I can do. And all round an extremely frustrating and disappointing kit. But I'm actually fairly pleased, all things considered, in how it's turned out. It's just, I just wish Airfix would give us a 48 scale Sea Harrier. I very much doubt they will. Their kind of ROE is, rules of engagement, is that they don't tend to produce kits that other manufacturers have done. Certainly ones of a kind of fairly modern-ish tooling. Unless it's a Spitfire Mustang, blah, 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 obviously. So are Airfix going to do a Sea Harrier in 48 scale anytime soon? I very much doubt it. I really, really wish they would do a Harrier series in 48. But I hear the GR3 and the T8 are not too bad. They're much better than this one, is what I hear. But I'm not going to get anywhere near them. There we are. Right, so I need to go and decompress. I hope that wasn't too ranty. Are there nice bits of it? It's nicely moulded on the sprues. Shame it doesn't really fit. Decals are fantastic, but then the cartograph. There's lots of oddities and quirks, and the instructions are rubbish. There's still some photo etch on there that I've no idea where it's supposed to go. I've done a whole load of research. I couldn't find out where it's supposed to go, so I've left it off. If you want a 1/48 scale Sea Harrier in your collection, get this one. But you know, unless you're someone like Mike Grant or Paul Budzik, who can do exceptionally neat builds, there we go. I'm just going to leave it there. I need to go and decompress. My next build is going to be just for me. It's not going to be on the channel. I'm just going to make it, and I'm just going to have some fun. I'm not going to photograph it. Well, I might do as I go along. I don't know. I'll see how I feel, but I'm certainly not going to film it. And I just need something for me to get the mojo back, because this was a right bloody mojo killer. And if I wasn't making it for a friend and it wasn't for a really good cause, I would have binned it if it was my model, for sure. And even now it's finished, it wouldn't be in the display cabinet. I'll just bin it. But that's just me. Right, there we are. Enough of the Sea Harrier. I'm going to pack it up so I don't have to look at it anymore, throw the box out. and I'll next see it when I hand it over to my friend. There we are, and I'm just looking at the stash over there. I don't know what I'm going to build next. I've got a good idea though. Other channel news then. So Matt Nichols, shout out to you, Matt, has posted the Qatari Spitfire. It's the early version. I bought 1 or 2 accessories for it, a seat harness and some exhausts. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to build that on the channel. And I'm going to do it as a magazine article, and then I'm going to sell the model on eBay. So all money to the WizKids charity. So Matt, I'm exceptionally grateful, and so are the girls. That should raise a nice little bit of money for the charity. So when I put that up on eBay, I'll advertise it on here as well, and on my Facebook page and on the socials. And yeah, feel free to bid for it. If you want a 1/32 scale Spitfire that's been on the channel and in the magazine article, then yeah, go for it. I don't know what magazine I'm gonna send it to yet. I'll have to wait and see. So that's that for the charity. So that's 2 things for the charity, isn't it? This and the Spitfire. So Matt, there's something on its way to you, mate. Ordered it yesterday. Sticker and stuff. So that's that. What else are we going to talk about? The news. Yeah, I'm a bit discombobulated because this thing has just finished me off, mate. Man, it's just dreadful. Right, some news then. The Clearprop F86A is available on their website to order. They're shipping right now. I know Drew, friend of the channel, Drew, has ordered a load, as well as some of their Mohawks, which you know is a beautiful kit as well. So that's available. Some quite cool new kit news. So Italeri have announced the C205 Veltro in 32nd scale off the back of their Folgore, or I don't really know how you pronounce it. I don't speak Italian. Apart from Scuderia Ferrari. That's the only Italian I know. But yeah, so that was always on the cards. I'm surprised it's come out quite quick actually, because the Folgore was only last year, wasn't it? So yeah, hot on the heels. You can go and get that very soon. Box art is out, really quite nice box art. There's a few issues with the Folgore, and I imagine some of those have gone across into this, but looks like a nice kit. And then a surprise, a complete surprise, a new Chinese manufacturer, I think they're called CSA or something like that, have announced a 1/48 scale Harrier, but it's a 2+. So it's the I was going to say, excuse me, bit of wind, US Marine Corps, but I'm pretty sure that the Spanish fly the 2+, and maybe the Italians as well fly the 2+. It's what the Royal Navy should have got, or Joint Force Harrier should have got, but they didn't. But that looks quite cool. It's got metal pitot probe and a metal cap for the nose cone, which is quite innovative. Quite like that. Some of the CAD renders look absolutely fantastic. Just some of the detail on the weapons just looks phenomenal. So I'm wondering if some of the weapons are going to be 3D printed. Maybe they are, or maybe it's just the state of molding these days is just that exceptional. And there's one photo of what looks like a built-up test shop. So yeah, that's really interesting. Always good to see new manufacturers sort of springing up. Be interesting to see what that looks like, how much it costs when it comes out, blah blah blah. I don't know any more information. You now know as much as I do on that. So, but I'll put some pictures up here, and you can go and have a look. And I shared it on my Facebook page as well, so you can go and have a look there. And there we are. That is this week's news update. Trying to put the microphone here a little bit closer, not trying to speak a little bit more softly, so maybe that'll improve some of this. Okay, sorry about that. The card filled up, so that's probably someone's way of telling me I've waffled on far too much. Look out for part 1 of this thing coming up tomorrow, or whenever you're going to watch it. It's on Sunday, the 4th of August, and I need to go and edit it now, so I'm going to endure the pain of editing that thing. But I am going to start a new model just for me, and I'm looking forward to doing that. Something quick, simple, fun, and easy to go together. And we'll see how that turns out. All right. Okay. Thanks very much. Take care, everyone. And I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Bye-bye.